Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to take on a mid-90s reel. This is the Daiwa AG2600. It's AG is Apollo Gold. And if you're going to work on these reels, you want to make sure that you test these before you buy these, because the parts are tough to get. And well, the biggest failure on these seems to be these AR overrides, the anti-reverses. This one's very sluggish and a little noisy, but other than that, this reel's a good candidate to get a second chance. I purchased these along with about 4 or 5 other larger spinning reels from a Facebook marketplace ad. Somebody was looking to sell a lot of these, and I decided I would go ahead and do them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to match them with some extra poles that I have laying around and see if we can't get these back out there fishing again as rod and reel combinations. So we're going to take this reel completely apart. I'm going to show you how it was made. And my guess is we've got some really dry and old lubrication in there. You can see that because there's all kinds of dust and just kind of grime and the like sitting on here, which means it's probably been in storage for a while. There's no line on the reel, so somebody probably took that off at some point. And my guess is, well, we just need to freshen all of that up, clean the old greases out, and this one will be spinning nicely again. While I take off the exterior parts, which I'm starting to do with removing the spool, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please hit the notification button. That way you'll see all of the fishing reels that I work on, and you'll be able to decide which reels you want to see me complete. I work on freshwater, saltwater, and everything in between, small to large, and conventional, spinning, bait casting, low profiles, everything. Well, just removing a couple of pieces like the screw cap here that holds the handle on, you can just see the old dried grease on that, and that would just probably tell me a little bit more about what I'm expecting to see inside the reel. We've removed the spool by taking off the adjuster knob. Now we want to remove the case so that we can remove the axle shaft. One of the things to do then is to see if the case goes all the way through or if the case stops below the rotor. In this case, it stops below the rotor, so we can remove this case without removing the rotor, which is a good thing. Another clue to that is there is no rotor nut on this reel. Let's see if we can do it that way. So this is one of these that's going to be held in by a U-clip, and a U-clip is a weakness in a reel as well. The problem with that is as that clip wears, there's a gap between the pinion gear and the rotor assembly and the holdfast, and it shakes. Well, in this case, that is not worn because you would see a big wobble in this if that was so. But that's not so here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to take these screws out then. These screws are Phillips head screws. I'm using a number 1 Phillips head screwdriver to remove these. And every now and then I get a question that says, can I use a mechanical screwdriver, something like this, to take those screws out and put them in? Most of the time it's also prefaced with, I don't have a lot of hand strength and all of that. You got to be careful with those mechanical screwdrivers, particularly on a reel like this. Going outbound, well, if the screws are tight enough or too tight, you risk butterflying the threads or the slots for the bits, and putting them back in, you know these things have a lot of torque, and you risk possibly cracking the case. So I'm going to move that to the off position, get that out of the way when I remove it, and we'll take this 4th one off. So if you're in the business of finding fishing reels and kind of tuning them up and reselling them, one of the best things to do is kind of pair it up with an appropriate rod. A lot of times you just can't get the value of a reel, or the reel just doesn't have a lot of value. And if you go ahead and pair that with a rod, well, generally you can get a little bit more value than you could if you were selling each piece in particular. The other side of that as well is that there are a lot of folks who just don't know what rod pairs with the the reel, and if you can help them out by getting them their combination all set up, well, you'll be better off for it. Well, this is exactly what I expected to see. Dried grease on the case, rust on the silver parts, no grease in the reel. Is there anybody's imagination as to why this reel is performing as poorly as it is? This one's going to sing a nice tune when it comes time to test it again. I want to get rid of that dried grease in the case. I'm going to use some penetrating oil to loosen that. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures now, because as you go to take the pieces and parts off, you may lose track of how they reassemble. And if you take the pictures here, you're going to find out you have a reference point for the future. There is no bushing. The case acts as a bushing. So if you find that you have a lot of slop in your main gear, there's no way to correct that. You can't replace a bushing or burring or whatever. It's just stamped into the case. We just took the shim washer off. The shim washer has two functions. It holds the cross-wind arm tight as it's rotating, and it also provides a little bit of space so that it doesn't rub directly into the case. Well, looking at this, the way to remove the cross-wind arm and the axle shaft is to pull the pin below. So we'll do that right now. And when I take these pieces and parts out, all of those pieces and parts goes into a parts tray. That's my way of keeping track of where everything is, so that when it's time to reinstall, I can find them. There's a lot of different ways to go organize your work. I'll leave that to you. The one that works well for me is this parts tray. It's been doing it for a long time, and as long as it works for you, go ahead and do it your way. Notice that there is a little shim washer on the top here. It might be hard to see, but there's a shim washer here. Those shim washers that go above the click ratchet are for line leveling on the spool. So if your spool is not lining evenly, you either have to put another one on or remove one in order to make that happen. That little ratchet there, just as a review, the click ratchet here is going to be clicked by this little arm here on the back end of the spool. That's going to let you know that the drag is going out, or you're letting line out from the drag. While I have this upside down here, I'm just going to take a cotton swab. There's a little bit of dirt in there. Not much, but we can get that off now. We'll be better off for it. As long as I have this in my hand, I'm trying to coordinate some things. I'm going to grab a little kitchen scrubby pad and some rod and reel cleaner. This is Penn's rod and reel cleaner. I'm just going to run it over the spool to take off that dust and dirt that we noticed from storage. This cleans it up. It's kind of a cleaner and a wax and or a polish. And it does a nice job. I'm happy with that product, so I don't mind telling you that that's the one that I use. And if you want to get a nice clean, now some of that's going to evaporate. You can't get rid of UV damage, but it's a nice way to clean and present your reel. This one has a missing button up top. Actually, it's a decal. It's not the button. There's nothing going on inside here that matters, but there is a little decal that would go on top of that. I've seen folks cut out a little piece of leather and kind of put it in there and just glue it on. Your choice. I don't generally work too much on the cosmetics of reels. I get questions all the time. Do you repaint the reels and things? I don't. I let the reels tell their story. But you can do that. You can cut out a piece, anything, but honestly, with a sticky bottom, contact paper or something, if you like, and do that. Well, we can see the dried grease on the arm, so we'll take care of that. And now we should just be able to pull this main gear out. Now this whole thing is tight, so remember, as you go to work on this, that well, it hasn't seen lubrication in a long time, so it may be a little sticky coming out, but you can take care of that. Same thing here. We have old dried grease, and I find that the penetrating oil is a good way to dissolve some of that. Hey, it's going to dissolve rust and everything else. It can certainly dissolved dried greases. And that even actually took a little bit of the rust off this piece. This piece is a steel piece. Well, you can see from the construction of this reel that it's not a very expensive reel. That doesn't mean it's not a good reel. It doesn't mean it doesn't have its purpose. You know, you don't have to chase $300 reels to have a good fishing reel to go take out in the surf, or to take anywhere for that matter. And this is a good example of it. It's a well-made reel, very simple in nature, and it can perform. So what's a good use for this reel? Well, I call them cottage reels, or cabin reels, or beach house reels. This is a perfect reel if you've got visitors to your guest house, or you're going away on vacation. You don't fish much, but you would like to bring something along, and you're not going to worry too much about it. Oh, this is a perfect reel for that. All right, we've taken off the top. You saw that we removed that U-clip that I was describing, and that's the one that sometimes wears down and gives you that shake in the rotor. Well, just going to put that in the box after I've cleaned that up. And this is telling of a lesser entry-level reel. Again, you have a little brass inset here which acts as the bushing. You have two sides that have no bushings. They're the case itself. And we have what I'll call pot metal, for lack of a better term, as the piece here that is your anti-reverse dog. I'm going to oil that. You don't need to take it off. One of the things you want to note is on this anti-reverse lever, there is a U-shaped or a V-shaped piece of metal that is acting as a clip here, and that's providing tension on this arm bar. And if you've taken the arm bar off, or if you found that your anti-reverse wasn't working and you found a V-shaped piece of metal inside, that's how it goes. So just a note if you're watching this video because maybe you have this reel and well, something happened when you took it apart, that's where that piece goes. That's not an uncommon thing. And again, taking pictures with your digital camera or phone, or hey, even doing a video like I'm doing here, well, that'll help solve any future mysteries that may occur when it comes time to reassemble the fishing reel. All right, well, this place is clean. I'm going to say that most of this grease just plain evaporated. Here's the inside of your rotor cup now, and we'll go over and show you what's going on here then. There's just a little bit of some debris in here, so I'm just going to wipe that out with a paper towel. Here's your stem. So this is a multiple piece. This is your pinion gear itself, a little toothed piece. The next section up is what goes through your carrier. So that's going to match up with your bushing there. Notice there's a slot in there, and that slot is where that U-clip is going to go. And then underneath it, this toothed ratchet is where your anti-reverse is going to intersect to stop it. So that dog, when it's active, is going to sit in the groove here like this. As you're turning it, cranking it, these little ramps in the back are going to push that dog off, and you're going to hear that click, click, click go on. Well, the only thing that needs to be lubricated on this part is the bottom half or so of this assembly. You don't need to put any grease on the click ratchet, but you do want to get grease after it's been cleaned. You want to get it onto the part that's going to go through the case and onto what will be that bushing, and you want to get a good amount onto the teeth on that pinion gear. You want to check the pinion gear. You want to make sure all the teeth are in good alignment, that they're uniform, they're not chipped, cracked, or bent. If your reel's kind of thumping along, well, chances are you've got a bad tooth in there. It could have been torn up. Maybe it got stuck with a snag and somebody tried to power out of it, and that's a good way to get caught up that way. All right, we still have that cleaning cloth, so I'm just going to take care of business here while I'm at it. It's best to do that off the reel because, well, nothing's getting in the way here. The only thing that's in the way are those two little back arms here for the bail. I'm going to use a cut and swap to kind of get in there and do that work. But we'll eliminate any sand or dirt or grease or grime that way. While we have this off, we know that the bail works nicely, so you do not need to take the bail off. This is what I'll call a dead arm. There is nothing there, it's just a tag of the metal wire. You never have to remove that piece. This side has the bail spring in it, and a roller. We'll oil both of those. And again, unless you are having a problem with the bail flip, or you knowingly drop this in the sand and you hear a crunch or a grind going on in there, well, you do not need to touch that. But if you do, there's a video out there on how to reinstall. Take that whole rotor, slip that in from the top. You need to align the stud to come through the case. Now you need to take that U-clip, and I can hear Chris already telling me he doesn't like the reels with the U-clips. Take the U-clip and reseat that U-clip right in there. The case is going to hold that in. There are no screws or anything to do that. The side plate case is going to hold that in. Let's go over to our main gear. We're going to do the same thing here. You want to check all the teeth for uniformity. Check them on the face and check the points on the side to make sure that they are okay. Again, it's an inferior kind of a metal. It's certainly not marine brass or anything. We called it pot metal. I've heard some other folks describe it differently. But regardless, it again, for the overall reel, depending on what the use is, this will act fine. It's not intended to be, well, I'm going to say it, maybe Daiwa will tell me differently. It's not intended to be your daily driver where you're going to fish this reel 200 times a year. But there's probably folks out there that have been fishing this reel 200 times a year and have had a great experience with it. And I don't mean to suggest that you can't. Greased up the piece that's going to go through the side case, greased up the teeth. Go ahead and put the main gear in now. And then you can rotate this so that you can get the offset circle for your block. We want to get our axle shaft. We wipe that clean, just a thin coat of grease, because as you go through here, anything that's kind of wadded up on there is going to come out and just get scraped and sit in the rotor. We're going to grease the back end of this. We're also going to take a little bit of grease into the channel where that pin is going to ride. So there are corresponding channels on both sides where that pin rides. And sometimes when you go to reinstall these cases, they don't line up right. And folks say, I got a tight reel, and they don't understand why. Well, the pin is not in properly on both sides. All right, we've one more place to grease here, and that's to put some grease around the section of the main gear where that crosswind arm is going to ride. Get a little bit onto the back of this as well. And let's go ahead and seat that now. What you want to do next is line up the hole with the hole in the back case, and then bring your axle shaft down and align the hole in the axle shaft with the hole in the crosswind block and case. That's what we're doing right now. It's kind of visual, probably a little hard to see overall, but let's, when you think you got it, give it a spin and make sure that it's riding up and down on the axle shaft. And we're doing just fine there. Once you do that, take the other side plate. I'm going to switch this to the off position now because I want to make sure that the case goes on nicely. Just like we did on the other pieces, this little scrubby pad has a great opportunity to clean it up here before it goes back on the reel because it gets a little tough to reach your fingers under the rotor. So we'll do that right now. And then you want to come in square when you set down this case, because if you come in on an angle, you may not get that pin into the slot here. So come down as square as you can. There we go. You get a nice noise there that tells you it's sitting pretty. Unfortunately, I just put that on and I just looked in my case here and I missed a piece. So that's the other value of having a plan for your parts. You know what piece I missed? Yep, I missed that little shim washer that holds that crosswind block in place. Alright, now we can do that again in case you weren't paying attention the first time. And we'll get that nice snap again. When you get the nice snap, make sure that the seams are nice and tight all the way around. You do not want to force anything by using a screw to pull a case in. That usually means that something's misaligned, and this is your time to make sure that it goes nice and smoothly so that when you do go to test the reel, well, it's working nicely. Okay, there's 4 screws here. I'm going to go opposites. So I kind of went to the right, now I'll go to the left. Then I'll drop down to the bottom. And then we'll come back up on the other side. So a very simple reel in design, one that has good purpose to it. Again, I call them cabin reels or the like. They're great for having somebody aboard boat and not worrying if that rod and reel go overboard, or if it gets stepped on, or if it gets banged. They have a good purpose there. All right, we're just going to tighten this last one down. I'm noticing as I did that I still have a little bit of dirt laying around inside this little cutout here, so I'm going to use that cotton swab to clean that out. We'll grab our handle and shaft. You can put a little bit of grease onto the handle and shaft. That'll prevent it from rusting together if it gets hit by maybe salt spray or something. Then we're going to put the screw back on. Well, before I do that, I didn't get this side of the piece, so I'll go ahead and do that with the cleaner. So if you do it yourself, there's really no question that you can keep these reels going for a long time. If there's a drawback, these reels just aren't that expensive, or weren't that expensive. They don't make this one anymore, but you'll find plenty of them on the market like this. And a lot of times, the cost to have somebody else service the reel, well, it becomes prohibitive. You can throw the reel away and get another one for the same price. All right, just last thing we want to do then is check out the drag washers. The experience I have with these says that this is either going to be a felt or a Teflon drag washer. And if I was to guess, I would say Teflon because, well, these reels don't get maintained much, and the manufacturer wants to make sure that they do the one that's going to last the longest, and yes, they are Teflon. Teflon is a self-lubricating product. You don't need to do anything with them. You remove them by taking off that 5-point clip right there, and make sure you clean the internal cavity as well as clean the surfaces of the drag washers. So first one in is a Teflon washer. Then we have what's called a keyed washer. There's going to be 2 of these. They have a rectangular center to it. That goes in next. Then you're going to have another. These are a little sticky, that's why you want to clean them. If they're sticking, they're not going to be slippery, and that's kind of the idea behind the drag. Get the slip one. Then we have one that's got points on it. That's called an ear washer, and that fits in these 2 slots inside the reel. Just like that. And then we got one more that's also stuck. So don't skip a section. Make sure if you're servicing your reel that you service the drag washers. Don't write it off as, oh, it's doing fine. It could have that buildup on it, and it could cost you a fish down the road. All right, those are the drag washers then. Almost lost my little clip. Clip goes in next. And you'll see there's a ridge in here where that clip rides. You want to make sure that it gets seated in there. Start on one side. Make sure that you get the point of that first part in. These usually can be set by hand. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. Make sure they're in the clip itself. It's just a retaining ring. There's no mechanical function to it other than the retaining ring. And then we're going to just put it on there. Rotate it to align it. Bring that in. Take your adjuster button. I'm going to tighten this one down. It's a noisy touching a button. And again, the click, click, click you're hearing is the little piece on that ratchet that we explained before. Tighten it all the way down, make sure that it holds, it does, and then back it off so that it doesn't kind of get stuck there. All right, time for a test. Look at how much smoother, no noise, nice and easy operation to it, and a good looker. It's nice and clean in the black sense. That bail trips nicely. This one's ready to get a rod, some line, and a second chance to go fishing. So I hope you've enjoyed that. This is the Daiwa AG2600X fishing reel. If you see one, buy one. It's got its purposes, and you never know when somebody's going to want to come along fishing with you, and you can have a day of worry-free fishing by letting them fish a reel like this. So I hope you've enjoyed that. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for everything it is that you do to keep us safe. To everybody, please stay safe, stay well, stay watching, and remember, if you are not a subscriber, please subscribe to my channel. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.